listening to the ArtStation podcast.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kevin Strike, and this episode of the podcast is brought to you by ArtStation Pro and Plus subscriptions. Now, just to outline a couple of things that you get, 4K images, analytics. You get also a better cut on the marketplace if you're selling things. Also access to the library of learning content that we are publishing on ArtStation Learning. If you'd like more information, visit artstation.com/subscribe. Or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@artstation.com. Please subscribe on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify. Leave us a rating or review. These kind of things really do help to get the podcast in front of more people. This episode, we had a great chat with Jennifer Coronado and Aaron McBride from Industrial Light and Magic. It was also fun for me to have Daniel Wade, my colleague, on the call. He's friends with Jennifer and Aaron, and so that made for a great conversation. Dan, maybe you just want to give a few words about what you do. And
Okay, yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I've been at ArtStation for about 6 years, so I've worked on quite a few areas. Probably the main ones are ArtStation jobs, the ArtStation challenges, and the Art Plus. So a lot of work, with studios and featuring artists there.
Yeah, those are always fun to see the art blasts on ArtStation and the community react to them. Jennifer, she joined ILM in September of 2000 and has been involved in many different aspects of the studio since then. So she brought a lot of great insight on the history and what's been going on there. Right now, she's the head of the Global Art Department. So that's important from a recruiting point of view and being able to give a perspective on ILM Art Department recruiting. Aaron, he joined in 1998 and has worked on some great blockbusters. As many of you know, Kong, Skunk Island, Jurassic World, Iron Man, and of course, Star Wars, one of my favorites, personal favorites, way back episode 1, 2, 3, and then even recent projects like episode 8, Rogue One, and Solo. So that was really cool. It's always fun to chat with Aaron. Dan, what did you like from that episode?
I love working with ILM. We worked on several projects in the past with them because they've been leaders of the industry for so long. It's great to actually talk to them and hear a little bit about the behind the scenes of how the art department works on projects. I think highlights on the episode were talking about how concept art has changed over the years, particularly with them in the sort of digital revolution, and also working with film directors and the challenges of working on a big franchise like Star Wars.
Yeah, I also was happy we were able to get into a little bit of the details about how ILM recruits for art talent and what it's like to work as an artist at ILM. Just a quick reminder, it is a good idea to keep your portfolio updated on ArtStation because there are studios every day looking at ArtStation to try to find talent, including ILM. We hear a bit about that in the episode. All right, that's good for this. Hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Jen, Aaron, so great to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. So you're both quite widely known within our community, but for those that don't know you too well yet, maybe if you could just share a few words who you are and what you're doing.
My name's Aaron McBride, and I'm a senior art director at Industrial Light and Magic. And I've been at ILM for about 22 years.
My name's Jennifer Coronado. I am the senior manager for ILM's Global Art Department. So I manage the art department across our 5 studios, including our newly open Sydney studio, which we'll be hiring for soon.
So let's first start talking about ILM, legendary studio, as we all know, and so many great films over the years. What were things like there when you started? Maybe Jen, we could start with you.
Oh my gosh, that was 472 years ago. So like Aaron, I've worked at ILM for 20 years this year, actually. And I started as a coordinator, and we were in San Rafael, California. We're currently in the Presidio National Park in San Francisco, but in San Rafael, it was, I think Aaron can attest, it was more like a trailer park was where we were. So when I first went to interview, I stood at the front door and I didn't realize that it was the company that I was supposed to be interviewing at. It said Kerner Optical on the door until I saw someone walk out the front door with a maquette. And I was like, oh, I am at the right place. So it was very collegial and very kind of haphazard and not very corporate in any way, shape, or form. And it was a great introduction for me for visual effects, for sure, because that was my first job in the film industry.
So, Aaron, did you started around the same time too?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think I had a similar experience too, going for my first interview at ILM where, you think you're going to like a night, you think it's going to be like a, Cyberdyne headquarters or something like that, where it's a very slick office building type thing. And it's actually, it kind of grew out of necessity. So it's very sort of, it was very kind of haphazard and sort of, there's a lot of just kind of add-on trailers and things like that. And, computers kind of plugged in as necessary. So it had a very low-tech layout.
Yeah. And I mean, we had our traditional model shop then too. And we had a speaker system where people would page people across the studio, and you would hear things like explosion happening on the slab in 5 minutes. And we were like in this suburban neighborhood, so I imagine the neighbors were traumatized. But we were half analog, half digital at that point. So it's shifted since then, of course.
That was at a time when it was not so well known that ILM was there, right? That's what, as you were mentioning, on the door was written Kerner.
Yeah,
it was kind of like a hidden location.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was funny, the security people, because I started out, I was in workplace services as a coordinator, and the security people used to tell me that people would show up looking for George. And like one guy came up to them and moved his hand across the security guard's face and said, "I'm here to speak to George Lucas," like he was doing the Jedi mind trick.
Right.
So I think, my old boss told me a story about how Bill Murray showed up at the front door one day and just wanted a tour. So they tried to keep it incognito because Star Wars has such a huge fan base that they wanted to make sure, we have to keep our clients' confidentiality as well. So it was pretty incognito.
So was the art department at that time mixed in working with everybody else? Was it kind of a mixed bag, or was there a separate area where the artists were hanging out?
Well, one of the acronyms that we always joked about for ILM was "I love moving," because we would it was always kind of in flux, like you'd be moving from one building to another building. And so when I started in the summer of '98 as an intern, and part of my job was just to box up everything because we were moving from one building to another. All the buildings were sort of jumbled together, but usually, I think we were co-located with IT at that time in the F building. And then right across the street was the model shop, the traditional model shop. So you'd always, I think it was Kerner Boulevard, you'd always just see these really beautiful miniature models being wheeled across the street, because the stage where they'd filmed them was on the same side as the art department, but the model shop itself was on the other side of the street. So yeah, it was very, there was parking lots and sort of driveways going in between the buildings. So there'd always be like a gurney or something with a beautiful model or something kind of wheeled between it. But to Jen's point, I think when we started was around the time that the prequels were getting up and running. Mm-hmm. So being incognito was becoming a big necessity. And I'm not sure they had been as top secret since the original trilogy.
Yeah. It's interesting too. Aaron, do you remember they had, we didn't have internet at our desks?
Yeah.
We had to go to internet kiosks.
We didn't have, when I was an intern, I didn't have a computer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're old. That's all we have to say about that.
I remember those days when the prequels were announced that coming out, and the excitement was just through the roof. Yeah. We couldn't wait for those movies to come out, and I remember thinking, me and my buddies would calculate the age we were going to be when Episode 3 came out, and we were we're going to be old at that point. ILM then moves to the Presidio, and you're set up there now. How is it different now than it was back then in terms of the working environment and what you do?
Well, it's interesting. They don't let you blow things up in a national park. So, we had initially explored having our stage and model shop in the Presidio with us. But that didn't happen. So they ended up staying over in Kerner, and they ended up spinning off into their own company. But so we're digital now. We're a CG shop. I would say there's a Northern California esprit de corps that comes with working at ILM. We are all a little bit rebellious hippies, even if you put us into a nice, beautiful corporate building. And I think the attitudes of the people remain the same. It's just the location that's different, if that makes sense. What do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I agree. I think, everyone still customizes their workspace in a certain regard. And so there's definitely a little bit of that. It's hard to, you can take the hippie out of Marin, but you can't take the Marin out of the hippie, or vice versa.
Yeah, totally.
How has the work changed over that sort of time period? You mentioned that you weren't digital to begin with. What was the transition like for that?
I would say, Aaron, wouldn't you say 3D really got pushed for you guys, like particularly as you start to get to Pirates?
Yeah, it's funny because when we were talking about when we first started here, one of my first jobs, my first day as an intern at ILM was working for an art director on the first Mummy movie, the Brendan Fraser movie. And my job was I had to run over and drop off some photographs to be developed. And then from a 1 hour photo that the art director had taken, and then go pick them up when they were developed, scan them in because we had one of the first scanners, and so that he could paint on them in Photoshop. So we weren't even using digital cameras, and there was only a couple of computers in the art department. So moving forward from that, I think most of it, at the time was moving into photorealistic artwork using Photoshop. Not just stopping at the drawing, but trying to work it up into a photorealistic piece of artwork. And then I didn't start using 3D until after the Pirates movies were done. I started using it on Rango, and the 3D thing really changed a lot because you were no longer just handing off a visual target piece of artwork, but you were also handing off a model as kind of a rough guide, blocking model for the CG production pipeline. And that felt new at the time, and that's already 12 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And then we continue to, expand into things like working in Unreal. So it shifts all the time. We have artists who are very painterly. We have artists that are very photoreal. And I would say Aaron's one of the first people who helped drive the photoreal look for concept art at ILM. So that's something we've pushed towards, is more photographic looking concept art versus painterly.
Yeah, it's funny. At the time, I started experimenting with trying to, for the first Pirates film, I started experimenting with a lot of photo textures and grafting them onto the actors to sort of realize what it would look like in the final frame of film. Not so much for the director, Gore Verbinski, to buy off on, so he could see what it was going to look like in the final frame of film, but also I was young and kind of intimidated by a lot of the CG artists that I was working with at the time. So I was a little hesitant to speak up in a lot of the dailies that we had. So I kind of was hoping that if I could get the concept art to look as photorealistic as possible, that it would require less discussion. And hopefully I could just, it's like it's that classic fear of speaking up in class, when you're at school, is I was a little nervous of speaking up in dailies. So I was like, okay, well, if I can get the concept art to look photoreal, hopefully I won't have to speak up as much.
So what he's really saying is being introverted is not a bad thing for a concept art.
Right.
You can speak with your work.
So long as you have a good work ethic.
Yeah, exactly.
There is discussion within the community and on ArtStation itself about concept art, how realistic it should look like, and is it more important to convey the idea, or should it look like a polished work? And you started talking about that a bit, but what's your thoughts on a photorealistic concept art versus quick concept ideas that you can pass on to the director?
I think, it's like anything in life. You have to meet people where they are, right? So some directors really need that photoreal vision, and production designers too, to be able to understand how the film's going to look. Some directors prefer the more painterly, abstract things. Some directors and production designers, which we work with, visual effects supervisors, are fine with sketches. You just have to. Everything is about managing a client, right, and understanding what their needs are, even if they're not articulating it. So you, after your first few pieces, which generally, Aaron, I don't know if you agree with this, they generally fail in the beginning. You start to get a sense of what really works for someone or not.
Yeah. It's funny because a couple years ago, maybe about 7 years ago, I was on a project and I started to notice that, in the beginning, working photorealistically had a lot of, flash to it. But then it was soon after that it became more about getting the idea solid in a rough sketch form again, because the capability to do concept art photorealistically became so widespread that it wasn't, directors would look at something that was polished and go, yeah, I know we'll get there. I know down the production line that it'll end up looking like that, but that's not the right idea. And so let's figure out the idea before we go there. And I think a lot of times if you jump straight to the photoreal, it feels a little bit like you've already decided on what the idea is going to be. Mm-hmm. And you've taken that discovery process out of it. So I think it has been a swing back towards, let's figure this out in rough sketch phase. We all know that CG is at a point now where we can polish it up quickly once we decide what the idea is. But let's come up with a really special idea first.
Yeah. I think that's some of the things with some artists that are newer to the industry. They get so into the tools. One thing that's really important with ILM is story, right? What is the story you're telling? Like, I have a degree in acting, and I used to say you could do the best performance, the most amazing performance in your basement, but if no one sees it, who cares? And it's kind of the same thing with concept art. Like, you can have the most amazing render in the entire world, and it's the fastest render, and let me post it on Facebook and say, look at my render. But if it doesn't tell the story, then it's a moot point, so you really got to take into account that filmmaking, games, all of that stuff, you're really trying to get a story out there.
And a lot of times, say you look at like a social media wall of beautiful artwork images, most often if the solid idea or the rough sketch, your eye will go to first, just because you get sometimes your eye will get lost in a lot of really polished rendering. But if your eye will just gravitate towards the solid sketch idea, mm-hmm. Then that's pretty telling.
Yeah, totally. And I think sometimes when you're evolving as an artist, like, don't forget there's got to be a place to rest, right? Like, you don't have to throw the kitchen sink at your pieces. Like, really be thoughtful about your composition. For film, think about cameras. How's it going to be shot? Those are the things you really have to take in mind. And also look at cinematography. Don't just look at other concept art. Look at production design, look at industrial design, like all these things. The world should contribute to your pieces, not just your fellow artists, because then you end up in a cycle where you could be doing the same stuff all the time.
Yeah. Sometimes, to Jen's point, the idea of looking at other inspirations besides other concept art, because sometimes that can turn into a feedback loop.
You both worked with several directors over the years. What is that relationship like working with directors? Are they like colleagues? Is it more like a client relationship? Is it different when it's working on Star Wars? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. It's a client relationship for sure, but the film business is very collegial, so it can be a very close relationship. It depends on the person. There are some people who are very boundary and hierarchical in their approach, and there are some people that want everybody's idea. So I think you just have to adjust your style to the different people you're working with. For Star Wars, I think we get to start earlier. Though I don't know what you think, Aaron. We've been starting earlier and earlier lately with projects, and it's our homegrown project. So that everyone at ILM wants to work on a Star Wars project at one point or another. So that people are always excited for that. But I think you just have to adjust your style to different people.
I think Star Wars is sort of the homegrown thing for us, where we're familiar with that as an aesthetic, but directors and writers are brought in and they bring their storytelling prowess to it. And so, it's still a client relationship where we're serving their story ideas.
Yeah. And I think too, the thing to think about too, is there's varying experience for directors, right? Doing visual effects projects or even visual development for bigger films. So there are some directors that you help guide along the way because they haven't done that before. There are some directors that it's rote for them and they've done this a million times. So they know exactly what they want. So there's all different levels. I'm particularly excited to see more diverse directors coming through our doors with different ideas and different visual styles. I think it pushes our artists as well to think differently, think about different people's stories and different points of view. So that's exciting for me as we see the film industry evolve.
Is there a difference on the live action compared to the movie work you're doing? Like, is there a sort of accelerated sort of timeline when working on the live action? TV versus film?
TV's faster.
Yeah.
For sure. TV's faster. Budgets are smaller, so they don't get as noodly about the design of things. You can still come out with some great options. And also it's about how can we efficiently use this across potentially 15 seasons of Supernatural versus one film, So not that I love Supernatural, but I do. So I think that's the fundamental difference.
So Jen, one of your sidelines is interviewing a lot of directors. Have you noticed a difference on the types of projects that they are sort of working with you guys on?
I think ILM's always been a place where we like to just work with cool filmmakers, right? And I don't know if I've seen a difference other than the evolution of diversity in the directors. I've interviewed people like Dee Rees and, Spike Lee and, Alfonso Cuarón, like a whole different gamut of different types of directors, Director Bong. I think we're in a really great place for storytelling right now, particularly on the episodic side. Like, I think there's so many good stories that we're seeing. I think there's a depth because most of the directors I interview are they're trying to get that Oscar that year, right? So we deal with a lot of those. But I think that even in the films that one would call Oscar worthy, there's definitely more effects work than there's been in the past. And I think, to be quite frank, as we're looking at the industry right now, this pandemic has created a 10-year jump in what the industry is, right? Like where we were 10 weeks ago is infinitely different than we were and we are now, and how the industry is going to evolve. So I think we're going to see even bigger shift over the next year. I think we're going to leap, like I said, 10 years in a very short time.
How much pushback can you or do you tend to give to directors when it could be something related to the story or something that you've been passionate about because you believe in something?
If there's a idea that you have,
mm-hmm.
I think directors like when they get a lot of options in terms of getting something new, getting an idea that maybe they haven't considered. I think it's important to serve their vision, and then you can offer options and ideas that you think might work well within that. But I think there's a certain point where you have to sort of consolidate it into what serves their story that they're trying to tell, so that you can move forward.
I think what can happen sometimes if artists aren't careful is they'll fall in love with their idea and they'll get frustrated that their idea isn't fully realized on the screen, right? But film is a collaboration. It's not one person, it's multiple people contributing to something. So it's also important, in addition to your work, to find joy in the people you work with and the collaboration. And just frankly, we're kind of spoiled working in a really cool, fun industry where we act like 12-year-olds. So take joy in all that in addition to your creative ideas. I think it's important.
Right. Yeah. Aaron, is that the way it is for you then now, working as a team with other artists, that even if your stuff isn't selected or you didn't make the cut, that you still feel part of the process and proud of the finished work?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's over the years, I've actually kind of stepped back a bit, and I don't do as much of the concept art. When I sort of became more of an art director, I worked with a larger team of artists. And I think you have to respect what part of the process you're coming in at. So we come in at a lot of different stages in production. Sometimes we're contacted for visual development. Sometimes we're contacted, to come in and work with a production designer. And sometimes we're just sort of coming in during post-production. And so I think it's important to have those conversations about, what stage would you like us to contribute at, so that we're not, you don't want to try and redesign something in the final stages of a film if the director's happy with it. I know that there can sometimes be a tendency to try and, to rework something. But I think ultimately we're trying to, meet the deadlines, and you don't want to reinvent a wheel if it's already working to serve the story.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I'd say, and Aaron will never say this, he's a fantastic mentor. And you have to be willing, when you're mentoring people and you're art directing people or you're managing people, you have to realize that you have to give up part of the cool stuff for other people to grow and learn. Right. And I think sometimes what I find is people are like, I want to be an art director, but it's like, do you want to be an art director? Because sometimes as an art director, you don't get to do any of the cool stuff. You just have to manage the client. And so you have to and it's okay. Like, you don't have to be an art director. You could just be a really awesome concept artist. And it's okay to be comfortable with that too. Some people just want to be on the box and be creative all the time. And that's super valid and valuable. There's all sorts of contributing factors you can have as an artist, and it doesn't have to be leadership unless that's something you really want.
I also think if you're interested in becoming an art director, you have to really love film. And sometimes you have to love film more than you love art. And so like a lot of times as an art director, you're on deck for anything they need. So it may not be the big, huge end battle explosion finale that you're working on. You may be working on the small console that a character is trying to hack to get through a door. And you need to solve for that, and not, sometimes that's not going to be the star of the film, and you don't want it to be either. You don't want it to be the star of the shot, because you don't want to take away from the important storytelling that's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because over the years, I think concept art has become so widely known and recognized that, you don't want to design for the art of book. You you still want to be designing for the story that the movie that, you want to be designing for the movie, and you want to be serving the story. I had actually a good mentor, an art director who still works at ILM, Alex Yeager. And he, when I was coming up, he used to always just say, he's like, you're not always going to be designing the star of the shot. You're going to be designing the thing that serves the story moving forward. So back to Jen's point, if you're interested in becoming an art director, there's going to be times where you're working on the big, cool thing. And then other times, you're on deck for whatever they need to just, kind of move the story forward.
Yeah. The other thing too, I think, if you're interested in the art director side of things about loving movies, like directors want to have conversations about movies that historically have inspired them, right? So I frequently will quiz some of the junior artists, like, have you heard of this movie? And they'll be like, I wasn't alive when that was made. And I was like, well, I wasn't alive when Lawrence of Arabia was made, but I've still seen the movie. So you should really know what are the key, like look at the AI top 100 films and start expanding into films that are coming out. Like Korea has some great films that are coming out now and have over the past 20 years. Like really give yourself a rich palette to pull from so that when you do get into those conversations with a director, client, production designer, you come to the table with knowledge, and sometimes that gets you a little bit further than even your concept art will, if you can work out an idea in a discussion. So those are things to prepare for as an artist.
It's funny, Jen, talking about having just a knowledge of, not just the genre of film that we tend to work in, but all film, is that a lot of times that, citing an example from a film will get the conversation further than a piece of artwork. I had a friend who actually edits trailers now. He edits trailers for a lot of the Harry Potter films. He and I went to high school together. And I remember he used to say, hey, let's go see this film this weekend. And I'd be like, why do I want to see that? That doesn't look like something I'm interested in. And he used to just say, for better or for worse, you got to see everything, because you got to have the vocabulary. And even if it's a bad movie, you can see why it didn't work, why a certain element of it didn't work. So if a design challenge or a VFX challenge comes up, you have kind of a knowledge of things that work and don't work, or why they didn't work. And then if you discuss it with the director, like Jen said, you have a common ground that you're all starting from.
Like my husband's favorite film is Howard the Duck. Explain that. Why I have a Howard the Duck sitting on our table right now because it's his favorite film.
That's great.
So there's little, but also ILM developed rotoing on Howard the Duck, right? So every film has a contribution to make. No one goes into a film saying, this is going to be the worst film ever. They all go into it saying, I'm really going to make a great film. So look for those moments in movies.
You're in a fairly unique position working on the Star Wars franchise because it's been around for 40 years and has, its own unique language. What's the process, when you're starting a new project, referencing back to that?
It can work two ways. I think it's when you're working with a large franchise that has an established history, it's good because you're working within a set of rules and a rich design history that you can draw from. On some of the Star Wars films, you do something and maybe it looks cool, but it's not technically Star Wars. It doesn't sit within that aesthetic. So sometimes it can, work for you as you have a foundation that you can develop on top of. And then other times it can be like, well, that doesn't quite fit the genre. But one of the other things that's really great about Star Wars is that it lends itself to so many genres. So many of the films, it's like, well, this one leans, we used to joke on Rogue One that, Rogue One kind of leaned into the Apocalypse Now history of Lucasfilm, where at one point I think George Lucas was going to work on Apocalypse Now. And then we kind of joked about how when we were working on the Solo movie, how that leaned into the American graffiti car culture a little bit more. So I think a lot of times you look at the, that rich visual history and aesthetic of Star Wars, and then you look at the project you're working on and say, okay, well, where does this lean? And then, lean into the American graffiti or the Apocalypse Now, and see where that genre takes you. But you're still, working with the building blocks of the original trilogy and Ralph McQuarrie's, brilliant artwork.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put on my interviewer hat for a second and ask a question. So Aaron, 98% of the art department is always super excited to work on Star Wars. And most projects, but Star Wars, as part of the company's DNA. Why is everybody still so excited to work on Star Wars? Why do you think?
I think it makes you feel young. I mean, I'm speaking from my own perspective, but when you hear that opening music, you feel like you're 3 years old again or 4 years old, and it's summer. And so I think, whenever I've been fortunate enough to work on a Star Wars project, is, your first day on it, you feel like you're 4 or 5 years old again. And it's like going back, and you're in your pajamas eating cereal on the floor in front of the television watching Star Wars, but you're working.
Yeah.
So I think to a certain degree, it just imprinted on people's DNA in a way that it makes you feel young again to work on it.
Yeah. I would say I see that in not just the people, like Aaron and I are the same age, right? So the original trilogy was part of our childhood, right? But I would say that for the kids who the prequels were part of their childhood, which is my younger brother sits there, the prequels are super exciting to them. Like they still look at those and get excited about them, because I think George had a great way of looking at a project through a child's eyes versus the adult cynicism that can come in, and it sort of imprints in that way. And I think that's why we sell so many toys.
Actually, to that point, I was fortunate enough to work on Revenge of the Sith, and one of the sequences in that movie that I worked on as an art director was the Mustafar lava battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And every day going to work was like being, 5 years old again. And I vividly remember after, that brief conversation that Ben has, there was all these hints and innuendos about what actually happened between Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. And there was word of mouth, people talking about, well, I think they fought on a volcano. I think they this, I think. And so all those things that you imagined and wondered about when you were growing up, every day I got to go in and kind of, work on that thing that you had heard about so much growing up. It was really, really exciting and very cathartic too.
I remember watching that scene, and there were chills. I had chills because it was like, oh, it's all coming to this. Yeah. And we would talk about it before going into the movie in anticipation of this battle that was going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the pressure like working on Star Wars?
It's funny because a lot of times it's pressure you put on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard sometimes to turn it off. Like a lot of times you're your own biggest critic when you're working on Star Wars, because you're trying to serve this thing that you've loved for so long, and you want to do right by it. That a lot of times, you push yourself the hardest a lot of times, but other times you can be your own worst critic when you're trying to serve something that you love that much.
I would say when he says a lot of times, all the times, they're their own worst critic when it comes to design. It's never done. It's never perfect enough.
Yeah.
But that's okay, because like I mentioned before that, I have a degree in theater and acting, and like when, as an actor, you always look for that moment, like you're on stage and you're like, all right, this is the perfect emotion. This is the perfect gesture. And it's very fleeting, and you get that. And it's so thrilling. And it's what keeps you coming back to it. And I think it's the same in design. Like you're constantly looking for that I've made the perfect decision. And what's always challenging about creative people is you've made the perfect decision. It's the perfect decision. And the director says, no, that's not the perfect decision. So it can be very personal too. So you have to be very careful to provide yourself with a guard in that way. But when you get when it gets bought off on, it's just, you float up.
There's definitely a high, like what Jen is saying with finding that perfect moment as an actor or actress. There's definitely a high you get from it. But it was funny, about 10 years ago, I remember, it could be discouraging if if you showed what you thought was a good design solution to a director, and they're like, oh, I'm thinking a different direction. This isn't quite what I was thinking. I remember about 10 years ago, I realized that as long as you do what you think is your best work, and you get it in front of the director, whether they like it or not, you've kind of left it all out on the field. You've done your best. You put it in front of the person who can decide whether or not it's right. And if they don't like it, then that's all you can hope for. That's all you can do. So I think in this business, or in this profession as a whole, you just want to do your best work, and hopefully it's in front of the person who can decide yes or no. Mm-hmm. And if they decide no, that's fine. But at least they saw it. At least they decided, they made the decision.
The other thing I think that is important as a creative person is don't let your job be your only fuel. Mm-hmm. From a creative standpoint, like years and years and years ago, I took an acting class that Kathy Bates came and taught. And she said, one of the questions that one of the students asked was, why don't we see you in more films? And she said, if I don't go live my life, I have nothing to contribute to a character. So you have to do your own creative things, and don't just let your day job working on films be the thing that feeds you creatively, because you may go through a run where you're just not hitting it. That just happens, So give yourself some time to do things that are really creatively important to you as well. I think that's part of keeping your creative spirit going.
Yeah. What are some moments on film that you're particularly like your proudest achievement? Maybe Aaron, that you feel like a scene that you worked on, or something that's like the best one, and then also maybe one that you would like to take over again.
Question.
I wish I knew 3D when I was working on Minority Report. I had to I think Minority Report was the second or third project that I worked on, and I had to figure out some of the finer details and intricacies of the magnetic roadway and how the exit ramps peel off and things like that. And I love how it ended up in the film, but it was tough to draw those things, to figure out the architectural elevations and the accelerated curves of an exit ramp and things like that, for the CG artists. And I wish I had known 3D at the time, because I think there was a lot of late nights trying to figure out how accelerated a curve you could take on an exit ramp that looked realistic or was a comfortable speed for the car to exit at. So I wish I had known 3D back then, but I think that was 2001 or 2002. I was working on that, and so we weren't really. I think a couple years later, Eric Tiemens introduced me to SketchUp, mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, "Boy, I wish I knew this on Minority Report."
I would interject really quickly, just to the point that Aaron made. That's design, right? Thinking about how in the film the accelerated curve is going to work when the character has to come around it in an automobile. That's not just a concept piece, that's design. It helps function for the film, and that's an important part of what this team does, is figuring out those things. So what's your favorite though, Aaron? You didn't say that. You just said the one you didn't.
I've been fortunate to work on a lot of really fun and very satisfying and rewarding projects. Honestly, I couldn't pick one. I know that sounds sort of cliche. I couldn't pick one. I've been really fortunate to get to work with a lot of really, really talented directors that it's hard to pick one thing. So yeah. How
Maybe
about
it's the lava battle. It's the lava battle of ObiWan and Anakin.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what it is.
That was actually really scary, because that was only the second time I had worked as an art director, and that whole lava battle had to be built on a miniature landscape. I mean, when I say miniature, I mean it was the size of a large soundstage, and it had to be cantilevered up we had to build this whole kind of landscape. And then back then, to do lava, the best technique to do lava was to run methicil, which is like a food thickening agent, over clear plexi that you would uplight. And so we built this whole landscape with this plexiglass bottomed river through it. And so all this work had to go onto this miniature, which is fine, but then the whole thing had to be cantilevered up on one end so that the methicil would run downriver and get the impression of this torrential lava river. So that was daunting, going over there and working with a lot of these. And working with the model shop guys was always a lot of fun because they always kind of were a bit mellow. So what seemed like a huge undertaking, they were always just kind of chill about. So sometimes when you just go over and talk to them and show them some concept art, they kind of relax you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, yeah.
So I'd also like to ask you, Jenna, your thoughts on favorite moment in film.
Yeah. So, I'm just a suit who wears t-shirts. So my favorite thing is watching people do things that they don't think they can do and watching them succeed. That is my favorite thing. Like when I see some of our junior artists, they're hitting their head against a wall and they're like, I can't ever do this. I'm going to fail. And then they succeed. I don't have kids, and that's my moment of parental pride. Right. Mm-hmm. And picking favorite films, that's so tough. One of my favorite films at the moment is Parasite. I think that's a perfectly constructed film from top to bottom. But if I'm going to get super cheesy, I love Xanadu because there's roller skates and rainbows and Gene Kelly, and what else could you want in a movie?
The guy from Warriors.
And the guy from Warriors come out and play. But I also love old school 40s films, and I love films like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf that Mike Nichols directed. I love the character development in that one. Princess Bride. There's such a rich tapestry of things to pull from. Cinema Paradiso is one of my favorite films, which is an Italian film from the 90s. One of the first foreign films I ever saw. So I can't pick a favorite, but I can pick my current favorite would probably be Parasite.
So we, for the people who are not aware, we worked with the ILM Art Department in 2016 on the most epic art challenge ever created. And the commitment of the artists who joined that challenge was like nothing I've ever seen. It was, they were fulfilling their lifelong ambition of working on the Star Wars films, and the art department team were great in, explaining, and showing what happens on productions. What sort of advice do you have for artists who have that goal of working on, either a Star Wars film or working with ILM? What should they concentrate on?
I would say some of the things that I see people do, sometimes they'll post everything they do instead of their best pieces, right? And so if you're just doing it for fun, that's totally fine. But always present front and center your best pieces so that when people are internet surfing, directors internet surf all the time. So they're constantly on ArtStation. So make sure to present your best pieces as part of what you're putting forward. And things that you're really happy with and fulfilled with from a creative standpoint. I don't want to see, if I see another painting of a knight standing against a hill overlooking a lagoon, I'm going to turn my internet off. So don't just go for the same things that everybody else does. Those are some of the pieces that I would say. Be very present in your community. Attend the events that you can. They're virtual now, but make sure to do that. Hit us up on LinkedIn. We accept people all the time. I'm very open. Ask advice. We're open. We loved the ArtStation challenge because of that. So many people asked advice. We're also very honest. If we think, this might not be the career for you, we'll be honest too, because we want people to be successful, not just in their careers, but in their lives. And we don't want people hitting their heads against walls if they're struggling. What advice would you give, Aaron?
That pretty much hits all of it, I'd say. I think if you're interested in getting into the industry, a lot of times there are established franchises, but then a lot of times you have to be very versatile in terms of aesthetic. So I would say be prepared for being able to almost have your work almost be invisible. A lot of times what we have to do is we have to work within an aesthetic for a genre of movie. And it's not always a very recognizable franchise. So you just have to be very versatile in the aesthetics that you're working within, I think.
Yeah. I think one thing that is super important, I think, as an industry, we have not done a great job at diversity across the board. And I think it's really important to amplify different communities, different directors, different ideas, different artists. Nock, who's our creative director, is really great at picking out people who you don't think might be a concept artist. Like he hired someone who worked at an Apple store because that person did some 3D models he liked. He hired someone who did visual displays at a retail store because he thought she had great taste. He's hired graffiti artists because they have a good aesthetic. Like, don't think because you don't do exactly what the film business is looking for that you don't have potential in there. And always feel free to ask because really great creative people can see beyond your first portfolio. I'm sure Aaron would say that he doesn't love his first portfolio that he submitted.
No, I burned it long ago. You'll never find it.
Right. Right.
It was truly awful.
Yeah. So, and he got hired anyway. So what we're saying is we hire people with awful portfolios. So look out for that. But I think we really like mentoring people from the ground up too. Uh-huh. So we have all levels of positions at ILM. A lot of Aaron, as he mentioned, was an art PA when he started, and now he's a senior art director. So.
Mm-hmm. So I guess you would say keep on practicing, get feedback from others, participate in challenges, or be online in communities or networking events, and try to resist the temptation to just stay at home and focus on perfection without getting feedback of others because you're intimidated.
Yeah. I mean, if you've gone to art school or you've gone to any sort of creative school, critiques are a big part of this business, right?
Yeah.
So if you can't accept critiques, you're in a bad position from the jump, right?
Yeah. To Jen's point, I think our creative director, Nock, he's really good about making sure people don't kind of close up and just kind of, work at their desk independently. He's very much about, let's get the department, looking at everybody's stuff and offering feedback and things like that. So I do think there's a huge value in being active in the community because, you can't just work in a bubble. Mm-hmm. And when you start getting into the day-to-day work and production of being on a show, you go to dailies every morning, and that's, your entire morning is just a critique every day. It's the first half of your day. So it's better to get that, that hesitation out of the way early on.
Yeah. And I think we do that even with our art assistants. Like, we ask them to contribute. And we do this globally. We do global art reviews where we pick an art director to lead the review session. So we have the global studios meet as a team, the art department, and they go through, everybody submits a piece and they go through a critique. Usually people are better for it, and they learn things that they weren't seeing, because sometimes you fall in love with your own ideas and you need a little bit of help to get out of those.
Or you can be on a show for long enough that you get too close to something. Mm-hmm. And I think it was like Dennis Murin was a big advocate of that too. And Nock became a huge advocate of, let's just open this up to a lot of different eyes if we're stuck on something.
Yeah. One of my favorite things Dennis likes to say is, well, good luck with that. So I think it looks good. Good luck with that. So you'd just be open to different points of view.
Now, ILM has the sites around the world in San Francisco and Vancouver, London, and Sydney, Singapore as well.
Mm-hmm.
How do they work together? Is it and what are the differences between them?
I think, we try to cast every project with the right individual, regardless of their location. There's logistical things, like if a client is in London, we'll swing towards the London team on something. But if I have, 2 storyboard artists available in London and we need storyboards for a director, then we're going to use the people who are best for that type of work. We're always looking to cast appropriately. That helps people be successful. We ask people to do a variety of things, but I think like Aaron can do anything, but his core skill is creature and character design. That's one of his strongest suits. So we really look to bring the best people in for the project. And, directors and production designers have opinions about who they want to bring onto a project. So we like to present as many people as we can and do it in the most logical way, so nobody's up 24 hours a day. But that's how we work.
Okay, so the art departments in each one of those locations so work together.
Oh yeah, totally. And like if, let's say we have a show based in Vancouver in post-production and we sign an art director, because there's different, I'll step back for a second. There's different levels of production that we do. We do visual development, which is in the beginning of the process. And that's generally either working with a studio who is working towards green light on something, or a director or a production designer. And then we have the post-production side of it, which is where we usually assign a visual effects art director who's on through the rest of the show. So if we have a show that's based in Vancouver and it's hub there, then we'll likely crew an art director there for that show. Same thing for London, same thing for Singapore, Sydney, and San Francisco.
Okay, let's move into the segment of rapid fire questions. Dan, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars. But I'll watch anything with Patrick Stewart.
Star Trek. Sorry. Star Trek. But I love them both.
The headline. This is the headline news of this podcast.
Yeah. Sorry.
I'm a Star Wars guy. Dan, what about you?
Oh, definitely Star Wars, yeah.
Okay, so there we go.
I will say I'm very activist person, and I like the whole exploring the galaxy and helping people. So that's what I like about Star Trek.
So, just with the recent events and everybody working from home, Aaron, what's your home setup? Like, how are you doing what you do from home?
I have an embarrassing amount of Dark Crystal toys, and a lot of Alien toys. So you can see a bunch of toys back here, but this direction is worse. It's actually been kind of nice, working from home, but it also sort of forced me to get my home work space up and running pretty quick. I recently moved, so it was it sort of like Jen said, this quarantine and pandemic has kind of accelerated a lot of things. I had to quickly get my house in order.
Yeah, our IT team was amazing, literally, because we got the stay-at-home orders, and within a week we were all set up at home. I had all the security that we needed, and getting into the network. It was pretty amazing what they did. A really talented team.
Just as sort of a follow-on to that, what's the comfort level with secrets and keeping things under wraps with everybody working at home?
I think it's the same. We commit to our clients that we're going to keep everything secret, and we all have spaces. We're not facing windows, and we're not. I'm not out on the patio talking about the next 3 Paramount films. So, we have to be more mindful, and also we have to acknowledge that, not everybody has a 4-bedroom house. Some people are living in apartments. So we ask people to look for security in the space that they're living in. Most of our artists have even more secure spaces. Like, no one cares about my Excel spreadsheets. So we have a commitment to security.
Sure. What are your hobbies? Outside of the workday, like what creative pursuits do you have outside of the movie business?
I used to have them before I had kids, and then and now I didn't have I played video games a lot when before I got married, and then I was like, once I got married and I had kids, I didn't have time to play video games anymore. And now my son is getting to an age where he's starting to play, and I will walk by and see him playing something, and it looks gorgeous. And so I actually am I enjoy being a video game spectator.
Right.
I just like I like watching other people play video games. I was never good at video games, but I like looking at the artistry that goes into them. So I love watching someone else play video games. And it's like, sometimes it's more interesting than watching TV, is watching someone else play a beautiful video game.
So I'm a cinephile for sure. I have about a stack of about 15 books that I have in various states that I'm reading right now. And also my husband last year got me up through high school, I played the viola. So I'm practicing that on occasion, and I've gotten myself back up to Ode to Joy, and nice. I've downloaded Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, and I'm going to teach myself that. That's my next step. So
you're both sitting on a mountain of knowledge about how to make great movies. Do you have scripts sitting somewhere in the background? Your own ideas that you. When's your movie coming out?
I will be submitting that to the Blacklist in the next few weeks, and you'll see that posted. No, yeah, I have one, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because it's going to be great.
What's coming up for you, Jen? Any projects you'd like to promote or tell people about, and how can people find you?
Oh, well, you can find me on Instagram at Jen Van Corp, and you can see me post pictures of flowers and my 2-year-old nephew.
Nice.
So that's exciting. And then as far as projects, we have a bunch of projects that we're working on. We have season 2 of The Mandalorian that's going to be coming out. We're excited about that. And waiting for our film release schedule to get set up again. So some of the films that we're working on currently have their release dates set. But there's a lot of good potential out there. A lot of Marvel, Lucasfilm, Disney, Warner Brothers, uni projects. But I just want to wait to see how everything shakes out in the industry with the releases.
So, Aaron, if you could talk a little bit about your IP project as well, that would be cool.
I have a personal project that I work on. Been working on it for many, many years. Off and on since college, and it's like an alt history of late 70s, early 80s, kind of Cold War Camelot type of political dynasties and things like that. I think just speaking broadly about personal projects, I think it's very valuable for artists in the industry to have their own personal projects, because they're ways that in working on mine over the years, it's helped me understand sort of when we work with clients and they're very specific about something, it helps you understand that this is their baby, and they're passionate about it. And so I think working on your own personal projects helps you understand the passion that a client can have. Right. And why they're specific about certain things, because you understand, like, well, this is when you work on your own project, you really are swinging for the fences on on making it the best you can make it. I also think it's a good opportunity to, you tend to explore things that, techniques and aesthetics that you wouldn't explore if you were on a tight deadline with a work project.
Right.
And also there's something that I love hearing about people's personal projects, that I work with. Like, I work with these two brilliant artists, Carl Lindbergh and Casey Straka, and they both every now and then will post stuff from their personal projects. And it's always fascinating to see, I am a huge fan of their artwork, just from day-to-day work. But given a blank slate, what do they like to do? And that, I always find that fascinating. It's almost like when you meet up with people at your high school reunion and you find out what everyone did for a living after graduation. It's like, when we're all done, learning all the same things for the same classes, what was it that stuck out to those people that they wanted to make their life's pursuit? So I always just find personal projects interesting from professional artists.
Yeah. One thing I want to add, this is more going back to the recruiting side of it. If there are films that you as a young artist or a newer artist in the industry love, like do a concept piece around that sort style, right? And feel free to post that because I think like one of the challenges we always have is our more junior artists, when a client asks for a portfolio, they don't have a lot to share that hasn't been released yet. So if you can build up your own stuff, that will also it gives you the joy of doing your own creative, but also it will help with you having a portfolio you can pull from for work in the future. Because we frequently will use some of people's personal pieces in portfolios to really illustrate everything they can do.
It probably comes across quite well too, because it would be ended up something that you're passionate about. If it's a film that you like and you're doing a concept piece on that, then you'll really put your heart into it. And sometimes no matter what field, as a junior, you're thinking, oh, I just want to get the job at ILM or another place. But actually, those that are hiring you, they want to know what you're passionate about. What do you like? And it's just it's a way to get to know somebody, and that's plays such a big part in, you're going to be part of a team, and we have to like working with you. We have to know you. We want to get to know you, but what you like.
We want to see how you think, and a lot of times you'll, when you first start out in industry, you might be working on a lot of projects that aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse. And so showing personal work can really show sometimes where you shine, what your true strengths are sometimes.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. So just a reminder to everybody, companies and studios are always looking for new artists on ArtStation. So make sure to keep your portfolio updated, as we're mentioning some ideas of how you can do that. Your profile as well, your availability and your skills. And also look for the latest job opportunities on artstation.com/jobs. And ILM has been posting for a long time. Lots of great, exciting jobs from ILM as well. Thank you so much again, Jen and Aaron, for coming on.
Yeah, we were super excited that you asked us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
See you on ArtStation.com, the global hub for creative professionals. You've been listening to the ArtStation podcast. Hit subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And please leave a rating and review for the podcast. We promise we'll read them all. See you next time.